Thank you for joining the SV2 Fall Gathering. I'm sorry we had to pull you away from that beautiful sunset to come in here, but we'll try to make it worth your while. It's great to see all of you here. We have a nice mix of SV2 partners here. We've got a number of grantees. We've got friends from the community. We've got our wonderful SV2 staff. And we even have a contingent from China who are involved with an SVP-type organization in China that were brought here by our former board chair, Lance Ford. So welcome to them. So I'm Bill Brownell. I'm the newest SV2 board chair as of this summer. And I've been a partner at SV2 for 3 years and on the board for 2 years. And people sometimes ask me, well, what drew you into SV2? And besides saying it was Kelly Pope and a couple of others that introduced me here, I always say there's really one answer to that, and that is the community. And I just really think SV2 is a unique community of like-minded individuals that come together to give back and to do good and to try to do what we can to address social problems. And that's really what drew me into SV2. I think it's a unique place in terms of learning, working together, and also joining forces to have more social impact. I know for me, I'm having a lot more social impact with this group than I could do on my own. And I like this picture. This is from the last gathering we had in the spring. Some of you were there. And I also wanted to note a person in the front row here on the picture, which is Nancy Heinen, who was the previous board chair for the past 3 years. So thank you, Nancy, for your good work. I think many of you have seen this. This is the SV2 mission statement. I think it sort of captures what we're trying to do. I think it's good to go back to this. So as it says, we're all about unleashing the resources and talents of this community to identify and support promising social ventures to achieve measurable impact. So in good Silicon Valley fashion, we're trying to find social ventures kind of at an inflection point where SV2 involvement can help them kind of move through that and accelerate and have more social impact. So that's what we're really all about. And we're getting better and better over time, I think, at measuring impact and working with the grantees to measure impact. And we've had a pretty good track record over 15 years. These are the ventures that SV2 has funded and supported. At least the logos of many of them. There's actually been over 50. And I think within that group we have a lot of success stories. We had an investment review committee meeting last August, which is one of the board committees of SV2 that looks at the progress of the grantees towards their objectives. And one of the things that struck me in that meeting was the graduates, those who had just finished their 3rd year of an SV2 grant. And all 3 of the graduates were really on an accelerating trajectory. They're all doing great things, and it just made me proud of being associated with them and having SV2 help them. So in this particular case this year, it included Beyond 12, which is, many of you know, at this point supporting literally thousands of low-income first-time college students on their transition to college and being successful there and beyond. It included Medic Mobile, which I think, as some of you know, came out of our international grant round and on a very close vote, as I recall, and has really just blossomed. They're improving the health outcomes of well over 1 million people in developing countries right now with their mobile-based health-related applications. And then it also included Pie Ranch, which came out of our environmental grant round, which has really, I think, become quite a best practice model around sustainable farming and organic products, and has some really interesting partnerships now with Stanford and Google and others. So, you know, those 3, I think, were just 3 good examples of SV2 in action with some very successful grantees. Now, if we think about this coming year and what's our next set of grantees, we've got a pretty exciting year ahead, I think. We started our educational grant round 2 weeks ago under the leadership of R.T. Chandra and Mark Wilson, along with the expert support from our wonderful grant leader, Elizabeth Dodson. Later this week, we're starting our impact investment round, which I think will be a really important step forward for SV2, going beyond grant making into investing in social enterprises. So it's a bit of an experiment. We'll see how it goes. And that one's being led up by Tony Stainer, Gina Jorash, and Carl Matsky. And then in the winter, in January, we have our international grant round, which will be led up by Jill Matsky and Rachel Klausner. And then in the spring, we have our lightning grant round, which will be focused on the environment, led by Shayla Neeson and Lisa Guerra. Lisa Guerra. So, and that one is one we piloted last spring. And some of you were involved with that, I think. It was really a successful pilot around doing grant making in a kind of light touch, fast way, which is really appealing for people that have busy lives but want to go through this process. So those were some of the grant making things we have coming up this year. In the area of family giving, we have the SV2 Kids program that's already started. We had the Compassion Games in Menlo Park the weekend before last. We've got an SV2 Teens program starting up later in the fall. And I think some of the SV2 partners have really found it powerful to involve their family in this whole equation. And it's been really good for their kids to be exposed to giving and community service. And so that's, I think, been pretty successful. And then we have our learning programs, and you can see some of the ones coming up there that are happening soon. There'll be more during the year. And as we sometimes say, we're not only about improving the capacity of our grantees, we're also about improving the capacity of ourselves as givers. And so the learning has to do with that. And while I'm on this, I wanted to thank all of the partners that are taking leadership roles. This is a really partner-powered organization. I mentioned some of the names of the grant round leaders. There's others, it's like grantee lead partners. There's others that are doing work in some of the program areas. There's the whole SV2 board. So really wanted to thank all the partners that have stepped up on leadership roles at SV2. That's really part of our model. Okay, let's turn to tonight's program. So the theme tonight is Unlocking Human Potential, and we have some speakers from different organizations that are all about unlocking human potential in their own way. And the first two are new SV2 grantees. First, Somos Mayfair, where we're going to hear from Camille Llanas Fontanilla, and who's the executive director, and Dilsa Gonzalez, who's one of the community leaders. And you'll hear about their model, which I think is a pretty unique model, driving community outcomes and early childhood education and strengthening families in East San Jose. Then we'll hear from Debbie Hall, who's the board chair at Village Enterprise, which is unlocking human potential in terms of raising people out of very extreme poverty in rural Africa with some really innovative methods of giving them the tools to build sustainable enterprises. And then we'll hear from Jessica Jackley, who's co-founder of Kiva and an author. And many of you know Kiva, I think. It's a platform for unlocking human potential in terms of bringing donors together with social entrepreneurs and alleviating poverty in developing countries. And I'll save the details on Jessica because our wonderful and star executive director, Jen Rattay, is going to do a longer introduction on Jessica. So, and then before I close, let me also thank our sponsor tonight, Legacy Venture, and also the Jewish Community Center for hosting us, and then also for our top-notch SV2 staff members that have really been driving this, including Lisa and Ashley, who didn't want me to name her, but I'm sorry, I had to. Okay, with that, let me invite Camille and Dilsa up to the stage, please.
Good evening. My name is Camille Llanas Fontanilla, and I'm the executive director of Somos Mayfair. Somos Mayfair is just east of downtown San Jose, and for those of you who don't know, it can be delineated by the Allen Rock and King intersection, as well as the 280 and 101 freeways. And for our community, it's home to 20,000 residents. The majority of them are from new first and second generation immigrant communities from Mexico, other Latin American countries, as well as Vietnam and Cambodia. Our community has a high population of English language learners, and it is home to the working poor. So our median household income is $38,000 a year, and 86% of our families qualify for free and reduced lunch in our school systems. But despite these challenges, our neighborhood is also home to very rich culture, traditions, and histories, and it's also where the labor movement and the legacy of Cesar Chavez continues to fuel our work today. And for us as an immigrant community, we also know that our parents are hungry for a different life and a different reality for their children. At Somos, our work stems from this deep hunger, and we activate the leadership of the neighborhood to take collective action and make meaningful changes in the lives of children and families to create sustainable communities. And because this community impact and theory of change is really centered on the very premise that community members, the people who are most affected by community crisis, can be and are the agents of change, we believe that we unlock human potential every day in Mayfair. So some of you may be asking, how do you do this? First of all, we start early. We provide young children ages 0 to 8 and their families with early learning and literacy experiences. In Mayfair, many of our schools struggle to provide their children, or our children, with the quality programming we need as English language learners. And so we use our leadership development model to train community residents and parents to be promotoras, which are peer educators, and they right now run all of our programming in the neighborhood. Before we started our literacy campaign, only 27% of our neighborhood kids were reading at grade level. And I'm going to pause there for a minute. 27% compared to 53% countywide. Over the last 3 years, our targeted efforts have moved the needle, and I'm really happy to report that now 47% of our kids are reading at grade level. And while we've seen growth, we do remain committed and really committed to making sure that we close that gap alongside our community partners. But beyond this data, for us, we know that our work has great personal impact. And so tonight, one of our promotoras has joined me on this stage to share her own family story.
Hello, my name is Dilsa Gonzalez. I have 3 children, Esperanza, who's 9, Maria, who's 7, and Santiago Jr., who's 5. When I came to Somos Mayfair, I was looking for help. I was stressed and I felt alone. I spent all my time going from school to home and taking care of my 3 children. I did not have any friends or a sense of a community. At Somos, I found opportunities for me and each of my children. First, I enrolled in SEEDS, parent workshop that helped me learn how to support early literacy in my home. Esperanza, my oldest daughter, who was 5, participated in the Bridge to Kinder program. She never attended preschool, so this was a huge help for me. Now, she's a 4th grader, and she's reading at grade level. This is a great and really proud moment for me, because earlier on, her teacher put her on an early individualized education plan and said that she will have many challenges. Esperanza has also witnessed my growth from being a parent participant to leading and supporting other parents in our community. She just the other day said, "I am so proud of you, Mom. You help people in our community, and I want to be just like you. This is an honor." Maria, my middle daughter, participated in many different Somos programs, and over the last few years, she learned how to speak up, ask questions, and be critical around the world around her. And for our son Santiago, there has been a world of difference. Early on, we did a development assessment screening for Santiago, in which we found out that he's autistic. As you can imagine, this was overwhelming, and I didn't know where to start. Thankfully, I had Somos staff help me to fill out the paperwork and refer him to an early intervention specialist. I learned how to become my son's advocate.
As you can see, at Somos, we start early and we impact the growth and the learning and the trajectory of every Mayfair child. But at the center of all of our work is our unique ability to tap into the strengths of our families. We value their language, their history, their culture, their immigration status, and we encourage these families to share their stories and their experiences so that they can also learn from one another.
Because of this, we are able to see that we have value, that regardless how much money, the language we speak, or our immigration status, we are valuable and we have so much to offer. Living in a neighborhood like Mayfair, it is often easy to define us by income, race, or even violence. At Somos, we change that narrative. And in doing this, we support our kids in developing confidence. Just as my husband said, all our kids have grown in so many ways. Each of them has learned to become independent and express who they are. It is confidence and strong self-identity in which of my children that allows me to set high expectations that all my children will not only graduate high school, but they will graduate from a university. Right now, this is not a norm in our community, and I want to change that. Too often, in our poor communities, labels are placed on us at an early age, limiting our potential and expectation. My third grade teacher labeled me on my third grade because I just arrived from Mexico. I didn't speak any English yet. So even though I love school and I love learning at a really early age, I was discouraged, and over time, this became my own school failure. This cannot be the norm in our community any longer.
Dilsa's desire to take action and change this norm in our community is what we really hope all of our work at Somos leads up to. We go beyond supporting individual children and families to making sure that we connect the community to take collective action. So through community organizing, we strive to change the conditions for all Mayfair children and for generations to come. It is unacceptable to us that 50% of our high school kids drop out of high school. It's unacceptable. And so we are motivated to work against these systemic issues that cause this, and this is why Dilsa is here.
I know that my kids, our kids, are more than just statistics. I organize to make sure that their potential and dreams are lifted and that the school systems are doing what they're supposed to do for our communities. This past year, our organizing committee Empuje secured the hiring of a community liaison per school site to connect schools to parents, community, and to other community services. In winning this, I saw another potential opportunity for me. I have recently gone back to school to get my high school diploma so that I can potentially become a community liaison at one of my neighborhood schools. My potential has been uplifted, unlocked. I know where I'm going, and I will always know where I came from.
Dilsa's story inspires me every day, and this is how we unlock human potential in East San Jose. And our approach creates a ripple effect. Each family that moves from participating in one of our programs to taking a leadership role in community change allows us to impact our entire neighborhood. We directly work with 800 children and families every year, and what each family learns, they then take on to other families in this neighborhood. So when you chose this year to invest in us, you chose to invest in the potential of our community and also our organization. With your support and your thought partnership, we will be developing a model for growth and scalability, and we've started this work with our SV2 partners, Mark Wilson and Coke Lau, and really that's invaluable to us. And so we welcome other partners to engage in this effort, and really, on behalf of all of us at Somos Mayfair, we thank you for your investment of time, talent, and thought partnership, because we know we will be able to reach our goals and our full potential. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us here tonight. We're going to shift our focus from our own backyard here in San Jose now to halfway around the world. Village Enterprise has the mission to end extreme poverty in rural East Africa by increasing households' incomes and savings. Now, you may know that the World Bank defines extreme poverty as people living at the level of $1.25 a day or less. But what does that really mean? What does that look like? Imagine you live in a mud hut with a leaky straw roof, and you sleep on a sheet on the dirt floor. And you don't have enough resources to have all of your children attend school, or some just maybe some of the time, because you can't afford the school fees and uniforms. You try to grow enough food to sustain your family, but that's a struggle, especially in the dry season. And every day you're out looking for day labor, maybe working another neighbor's fields or hauling water for someone. Village Enterprise provides a path out of this extreme poverty through what's becoming known as a graduation type program. We deliver a 1-year, 5-part program that starts with very careful targeting of who are the very, very poorest. And we do that through conversations and involvement with the local villagers themselves, identifying their poorest. Then our Indigenous staff provides a year of business trainings, a grant of just $150 to start a business, ongoing mentoring, and a group business savings program. Our business mentors are local villagers coming from the very villages we're working in Western Kenya and a swath of region across northern Uganda currently. Each business is run by 3 people together who collectively support on average 20 family members. And this model is really cost effective. It costs us $500 to start a business, which translates to just $25 per live impacted. After 1 year, we are constantly tracking a number of measures to see how our families are progressing and improving. And we know on average that in the year, they double their personal savings. They see their standard of livings rise by 35%. That's in terms of what they are able to consume and purchase. And as a group, they have saved an additional $450. We have replicated this program again and again in many villages. To date, we've started 33,000 small businesses, and those have impacted 700,000 people. Thank you. So that's kind of the facts and figures of who we are and what we do, but what I really want to talk about tonight is our people, and in particular through 2 stories. I'm 1 slide ahead here. This is Apofia, who lived in a village outside of Tororo, Uganda, and I met her several years ago. She struggled every single day to find enough food to feed herself and her 3 daughters. She lived each day with absolutely no hope that tomorrow would be any different. And so just to survive, she consumed all the food she could find every day or any money she earned. It was all gone at the end of the day. One day, she heard about a training that was going to be happening in her village just under the tree. She was not even formally a part of the Village Enterprise program at this point. And she showed up and just hung on the edge. And that day she heard things she knew nothing about. She heard about savings and business planning. And so she left that meeting feeling motivated for the first time in her life that maybe tomorrow would be different. So she started putting aside very small number of shillings until she had enough to buy some improved seed and fertilizer for a cash crop, which she then took to the market and sold. And she continued to save, and next she could buy a bicycle and get her produce to an even better market. And when I met her, she had just built a wonderful brick home with a tin roof. Her 3 girls were all in school, and she was showing off this new pen for her pigs. Village Enterprise taught Apofia that she could believe tomorrow will be different. And with some business knowledge and training, it did lift her life from despair to hope. My second story here is of Joseph, living in the Amurio district in Uganda. Like Apofia, Joseph and his family was struggling to make a living. In fact, he described it as almost impossible before Village Enterprise came to his village. He and his family were subsistence farmers, growing millet, cassava, and groundnuts, but it was insufficient to sustain them, especially in the dry season. His wife frequently quarreled with him because she wanted money for luxuries like a mattress and a cooking pan, but there was no money. Through the Village Enterprise program, Joseph and his group started a goat rearing business, and the goats rapidly multiplied. Today, he proudly says they can afford 3 and even 4 meals a day. All his children are in school, and his oldest is in boarding school. he can afford to buy his wife luxuries like minor beauty products and that new cooking pan. But for Joseph, the changes did not stop at his family. They had important ripple effects in his community. One of the biggest problems in his village was the local town drunk, a man who made and sold local brew and drank it himself. One day, Joseph went to him and told him what he had learned through Village Enterprise. And he made an extraordinary offer. He offered to partner with the village drunk to start a business. And they did. He took him up on it. They traveled to the town nearby to buy green grams and sour gum, brought it back to sell in their village. And Joseph is so excited that this neighbor no longer makes brew to sell, and in fact no longer drinks himself. He is a completely changed man. When we asked Joseph what change has been most significant for him personally, he says, "I used to sit around waiting for government relief. I never dreamed of starting something myself. Now I have the knowledge to start any kind of business." I hope you feel that common thread in Apophia and Joseph's story. It's a thread of transformation. From being in a position where they feel the basics of life are impossible to moving to where anything's possible, including improvements in their family and community relationships. We hear about these transformations in almost every story. Here are a few just more quick snippets. Catherine says, "I used to beg from my neighbors, and I know I was a nuisance to them. With my business, I now have enough resources. I enjoy better relationships with my family, and through the savings group, I've made friends. Before, I had none." Or Vivian, who is the chairlady of her business savings group, she says, "I've gained new skills in working with people, like how to set meetings and mobilize people into action." And Samuel says, "The training strengthened my carpentry skills by giving me the confidence to use them in a business. By working as a group, we have realized the spirit of working together as one. And this aspect of teamwork is a big change, for before we were people who were not united." While the economic changes are obviously paramount to what we're trying to accomplish, I hope you hear how important these social and emotional outcomes are too. No longer begging from neighbors and feeling shame. Having respect from family and community members. Making friends. Discovering that knowledge brings confidence. Feeling proud of the skills to mobilize your neighbors and work together. We are so grateful for this partnership with SV2. Your funding is moving us into this new phase to significantly scale our impact and unlock potential for another 700,000 people like Joseph and Apophia in just the next 5 years. And we're very excited to have you involved in the Beyond the Dollars consulting efforts to help us transform our own organization too, through improved marketing, PR, becoming known as a thought leader in our industry, and communicating better our impact to attract new donors. We have a special invitation for you all to come to East Africa with us this summer and see the impact. And two of our staff, Lucy Wirtz and Carlene Bernardi, are here tonight. Would be happy to tell you more. A recent Nicholas Kristof New York Times column title sums up the impact you are having. The power of hope is real.
I'm Jen Rattay. It's my great honor to serve the SV2 community as Executive Director. Another great honor I have is to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Jessica Jackley, who is a longtime dear friend. About a decade ago, Jessica and I worked side by side together, desk by desk, at the Stanford Graduate School of Business's Center for Social Innovation. And it was right around that time that she went on a transformative trip to experience on the ground some time in East Africa that was made possible by a special organization, SV2 Grantee Village Enterprise. Around that time, Jessica began conceiving of Kiva, which quickly became the world's first peer-to-peer microlending website. And fast forward to today, a decade later, Kiva's facilitated more than $750 million in loans among individuals across 200 countries. Jessica's full bio is in the program, so I won't repeat its many impressive details. Instead, I thought I would share just a few words that pop to mind when I think of Jessica. And I'm not talking about the impressive what of Jessica's career, but what I think is the equally, if not more impressive, how she does everything that she does. And that is by being fearless, humble, a disruptor of outdated paradigms, a lifetime listener and learner, a loving working mother, a leader, and a serial, and I mean serial, unlocker of human potential. And we're just so excited. Jessica has a new book out, Clay, Water, Brick, Finding Inspiration from Entrepreneurs Who Do the Most with the Least, and we have signed copies for each of you here. Please welcome to the stage tonight's keynote, Jessica Jackley.
Very kind. Thank you. And incredibly special for me to have, to be here with all of you and to get to have a dear friend give that kind introduction. So I'd like to dive in as well. It's very hard to follow those two acts, right? Do you agree? I mean, unlucky me right now. Man, I'm going to dive in and like my friends here did, I'm going to tell you stories. Two quick ones just to illustrate how I like to think about this theme of unlocking human potential. And in fact, these are two people that I met a decade ago during my time on the ground in East Africa doing an internship with Village Enterprise. And the first is a gentleman that I admire so much that I thought he was worthy of naming a book after. This gentleman lived in Uganda, near Tororo, actually, which was already mentioned too, which is so great. I have reference points. And basically, he told me his story as it had unfolded over the previous few years. This was 10 years back. Patrick had fled the northern area of the country after a rebel group attacked his village, and he settled with family, distant cousins, near Tororo. And he decided to start fresh. I mean, had to start from virtually nothing. He fled with just his brother. Most of his family was lost. He had no possessions. He was young, uneducated, hardly had anything. I mean, didn't have shoes on his feet, but had a strong desire to make life better for himself and his brother. So one day, he literally, right, not in a cliche way, not rolled up his sleeves in air quotes here and got his hands dirty, but literally decided as he was kind of sitting, figuring out how he was going to feed himself and his brother that day, dug into the earth and started to dig. He started to dig and to learn and to explore. And he realized that there were parts of the earth, parts of the dirt that were different, these clay deposits. And if he mixed those patches of clay with water, he could slowly form them and form bricks. Now, he took something, the ground beneath his feet and started to make it into something valuable. Took almost nothing and made it into something. And he started to, again, with his bare hands, make these bricks, was able to sell them for just the equivalent of fractions of a penny each, a few shillings. He saved up, got better and better at making those bricks and selling those bricks, and eventually was able to buy a brick mold that looked somewhat like this. Now, it might not look like a big deal. It took him a while to save up enough to purchase something like this. But this allowed him to double his production instantly and to make bricks that were more evenly and consistently shaped and sized. Big deal. He was able to sell these bricks more quickly. He was able to sell them for a little bit more. And you can imagine where this goes. So he saved up even more. And while baking his bricks in the sun was quite effective, he knew that the bricks would be made stronger and would sell for even a little bit more if he could bake them in a self-contained kiln. So he saved up, went to a nearby village, learned how to do this, and then sold his baked bricks for even more. So fast forward even more. Eventually he was able to hire his brother and then a neighbor and replace his homemade implements. He was off to the races. And by the time I met him, he, just like Apofia and Joseph and so many others, was able to kind of show off his incredible accomplishments, the ways that his life had been improved thanks to his hard work, his vision for the future, and his incredible business that had been supported by Village Enterprise. Now, I'm going to tell you a different story, and this was, I want to be very clear, a much rarer story. In fact, it's so rare that it stood out for me, 10 years later as I think back to the most impressionable moments, meeting for the first time these incredible entrepreneurs who did the most with the least, who've inspired the rest of my career. I met a woman named Fatuma about 700 miles due south of where I met Patrick, ish, outside of Dodoma, Tanzania. Now, Fatuma was equally eager to welcome me and to show off what she had done, but her story kind of stopped short in a way that is, again, really stuck with me. It's been like an itch for 10 years because I've wondered and wondered about why her story was so different. Now, she pulled me into her home. I don't know how many of you have gotten the wonderful opportunity, but I hope many of you will this summer with Village Enterprise, to go into mud homes like this. I'm kind of a connoisseur. I think it's incredibly interesting. And some of the homes look like this when you walk inside. Well lit, lots of stuff around, quite homey and cozy, and you think, yeah, maybe I could do this, which is not, that's giving myself a little too much credit. Fatuma's home looked a lot more like this. It was very basic. There was a mattress in the corner, and there were 2 chairs and a table, and that's it. This is where she lived with her family. She began to tell me how, she had received funding and had done very well with her business activities after she had gone through the training and gotten funding from Village Enterprise. Unfortunately, as I looked around, I was very confused because on paper, her records that she showed me demonstrated that her business had done so well that, my adrenaline was going. I thought, we have a rags to riches story on our hands here. Like, this is going to be a big deal, like front of the marketing brochure. This is great, right? But I asked her how she had used the proceeds from her business, all of her profits, because her business was growing, but not at such a rate that it looked like all of them were back in. And long story short, I pushed and pushed, probably a little bit obnoxiously, but I was so curious. And she finally said, I'll tell you. And she got a little bit quiet and got a smile on her face, went to the other side of her hut and pounded the ground and said, "It's in the World Bank." Ha ha ha. She literally buried the money in the ground, okay? It was a great joke, right? I thought that was really clever. I thought it was pretty great. And look, I am all for savings. There's so many caveats I could give her. It could be its own lecture. She was awesome, right? She had done so much. But she had stopped short of realizing her full potential. It was clear. She had stopped out of a kind of fear. And while I don't understand the rest of his story, and unfortunately I haven't kept in touch, and my records were not the most accurate, and I can't look her up and call her or go visit her again, but I remember her story so much because it made me wonder, gosh, why? Why is Patrick's story different? Why is it so different from Fatuma's? Why did she stop short of reaching her potential? And in short, why do some people dig and unearth amazing things out of almost nothing? And why do some people bury the treasures that they do have? Dig or bury? And I think, we're here tonight to talk about what's the secret of unlocking human potential. And I think, just my opinion, but I think it comes down to 2 things. One, I think it comes down to the stories that we tell ourselves, about other people, and about the world, and how fervently we believe those stories to be true about the future. Can it be better tomorrow than it is today? And secondly, I think that unlocking potential does have something to do with entrepreneurship, a particular kind of entrepreneurship. So look, my favorite academic definition of entrepreneurship is Howard Stevenson's. He says that entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. Now, I'll say it again because I think it's an awesome definition and actually quite romantic. Like, I swoon a little bit when I hear it, even when I'm saying it myself. So I'll say it again. It's the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. It's romantic, right? Without regard to a stumble or a fall, even if you don't have the resources, the financial or other resources that you need, even if a challenge comes up, regardless of what the world might tell you that you don't have, or why you're not qualified to take the next step forward. Maybe you have the wrong education or not enough education, or the wrong experience, or you're too young, or you're too old, or there's always something that we can believe that tells us we should stop where we are and not keep going forward towards the dreams we have for the future and how it can be better. And the great entrepreneurs that I've met, like Patrick and so many others throughout the years, believe that the future can be different, have a very clear picture of what that can look like, and they're so convinced that they're willing to override the things that come at them, the barriers that come up day to day, to keep running after those things. Now, they're compelled forward by a story about the future, and they believe it so much they begin to see themselves in that future. It becomes very real to them. So look, how do we get there? How do we be believers of these stories too, of the best possible future? I think it takes practice and housekeeping. I think it takes a lot of discipline to sort through the stories that we've absorbed over the years that have lodged themselves in our minds and our hearts, and to either, to clean them out, right? But to reiterate the ones that are the most true and that give us the most hope and give us the most sense of possibility for the future. So let me give you an example. Oh, sorry, that was I pulled up an old presentation for myself. All right, I'm going to just skip to this one. In my own life, I've had to revisit stories again and again that have told me that people who live very different lives than I've gotten to live, living in poverty, only have stories of sadness and suffering. I've been told by a lot of well-intentioned organizations and individuals that their story is a desperate one, a hopeless one. And stories like this certainly called me to action many times in my life, over the first few decades of my life. But they also, and I would always act, not always, but usually, right? I would hear a sad story about poverty, something that was, again, focused on suffering and desperation and hopelessness, and I would feel natural human reactions, guilt, maybe even shame about my own relative middle-class American wealth. I would feel terrible, heartbroken, if I'd really listen to them and take them in. And I would call the 1-800 number or whatever I was told to do to feel better for myself. And so at my worst, I would call, I would get involved, I would throw my change in the jar, so to speak, and I'd feel okay, I'd feel better temporarily. A few weeks later, I'd get a nice letter telling me that thanks so much for the donation, but there's more bad news, more bad news, and we need another donation. And the stories kept coming, and my panic kept coming, the asks kept coming, but I felt like there was just something wrong with this relationship because I realized that my participation was in this story that I didn't fully believe. I didn't think it was all that. I thought that was one-sided, right? It wasn't all bad news. These were human beings that had other sides of the story too. But I couldn't find those stories right away. I didn't know where to look for them. And I started to tune out. Again, natural human defense mechanisms, I think. An invisible barrier sort of started to form between me and these other people that I so longed to help and be useful to and to serve. Until one day when I heard a news story about poverty and potential and entrepreneurship. So I was working at Stanford, near Jen, and one day a gentleman named Dr. Muhammad Yunus came to campus to speak. Now, for me, I'd never heard about this guy before. I really had no idea what microfinance was. I studied philosophy and poetry, and I didn't know the difference between profit and revenue, for real. And here I was working in the business school. Anyway, so I heard, there was an email blast that went out on campus that said, Dr. Yunus coming to speak. This was the fall of 2003, 3 years before he and his Grameen Bank would win the Nobel Peace Prize in their pioneering work in modern microfinance. But again, I had no idea who the guy was, but I went to hear him speak anyway. Thought, why not? I'll stay late after work and check it out. Sat in the back of the classroom. There were about 50 people there. I sat in the back so I could leave if it wasn't exciting, right? Just to spell that out. I was critical, is what I'm trying to say. But he spoke, he told his story, and I was very moved. First, he talked about microfinance. I didn't know that that existed. I didn't know that microlending, microcredit, and all the other products and services under that umbrella of microfinance existed. The idea that this little bit of capital, microgrants, all these versions, this little bit of capital at the right moment in time could do amazing things in a person's life. That was news to me. Second, he talked about his own story in a very accessible way. Even me, this philosophy major who had no idea what to put on her resume, thought maybe I could do what he did. He told us that his work really began when he stopped what he's doing, went and sat with people, a group of women in a village, kind of on the other side of town, across the way, and asked them directly why they were poor. Forget economic theories and academia, and he was a professor. He sat and just listened really well, really carefully. And I thought, maybe naively, maybe I could do that. So, one, wow, microfinance existed, right? Two, here's this great man who started his work by listening. And I'm talking pretty quickly up here at you, but I can listen well too. I'd like to think that I can. I try to. So I thought maybe I could do that too. And then third, most important, he talked about poverty and he talked about the stories of people living with great economic need in a totally new way for me than I had heard before. He talked about people who were smart and strong and hardworking and had lives full of triumphs and successes as well as challenges, but who just needed access to this resource so they could continue to move forward. They were doing everything right. They were just trapped in a system and in a scenario that didn't allow them to reach their potential, to unlock their potential. And for them, this particular kind of person at this particular moment in time, that little loan was the thing that unlocked their potential. And I thought this was the greatest thing I'd ever heard. And by the way, I heard him talk all night about the poor and didn't feel terrible, didn't feel guilty and shameful and awful. I felt inspired. And that invisible barrier, I wanted to break it down right away. And so I begged my way into an internship with Village Enterprise. I went to East Africa, and the rest is history. I got to, indeed, really believe in a different story for the future, for other people, for the world, and even for myself. And I wanted to be in that. I saw myself in this different story. I wanted to be around the amazing individuals who, yes, lived in poverty but had great hope for the future, who, perhaps already had a success story, truly inspiring stories of success in the past. They had maybe started with a needle and thread under the shade of a tree, but now had capital equipment and an office. I met people who insisted on a story of abundance, and I encountered them in scenes of abundance, not scarcity. And I met people who saw themselves as givers, not takers, not receivers. And encountering this ability to hope, this ability to live out that hope and to keep taking steps forward despite incredible obstacles inspired me. And it changed me. And that's, I'm going to quickly get to the end here. I think I'm at time. Yeah, we're good? I am, but thank you for saying I'm also good, but I'm going to be quick. That's very nice of you. So look, I was so inspired by these stories and this idea that genuinely the future could be different. I really believed it. And I wanted to be like these entrepreneurs that I'd met that every day were overcoming incredible obstacles and kept moving forward despite everything against them. I wanted to tell those new stories to the world. So my co-founder Matt and I put those stories on a website. People like Sophia put up their loan needs. The people that we met, at first the 7 borrowers were in East Africa and Uganda, but it grew quickly from there. We put their stories online and then asked the world to help. And they did. And Kiva grew very quickly, as you said. So look, the world has changed a lot since I was a kid, listening to Sally Struthers. Oh no, did I? You know what, I'm so sorry. I was working from a different presentation, but I can do this. So the world's changed a lot. I think there are a lot of other better stories, different stories to inspire us. I think organizations like Village Enterprise tell those stories. And they're literally fueling and empowering and cheering on these incredible entrepreneurs, the protagonists in these stories, living out, getting towards this better future. Organizations like Somos Mayfair are doing this too. And their work makes it easier for the rest of us, I think, to find the stories that can convince us that the future can be so much better for others and for ourselves as well. I know for me, stories like this told me that there was only one way to respond, that the world only needed me to do something small and discreet and kind of transactional. And I know that's not what everyone in this room knows and believes, but I'm here to remind us. For me, understanding a new story told me that I could be an entrepreneur too. Maybe I could live like Patrick, like Fatuma, and live like these entrepreneurs that I had met. So I know it's hard to do, to keep taking steps forward no matter what. It's easy to get stuck. And the problems we all want to help fix are very big. It can be discouraging, it can feel overwhelming, it can make us panic, at least me. But we have everything we need to help unlock the potential of others around us and of ourselves, to unearth greatness in every person in Silicon Valley and the Great Rift Valley and everywhere in between. And I think every human being on the planet, I'm sorry, it's totally cheating, I'm ending on a kid picture, but I'm doing it. Okay. So every human being on this planet deserves this, right? Deserves to know these truths, the truest stories, the best stories of what's possible, the fullest picture, the most hopeful picture of our collective story. So help me, help all of us, remind everybody that we encounter, we're ambassadors here, that there's a better story out there to be told and to cling to and to believe so fervently that we can do whatever we need to do day after day to take steps forwards toward it. That opportunity is everywhere. The potential exists all around and especially within each one of us. We're each born with everything we need to keep taking those steps forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jessica, for those inspiring words and stories. That was great. And thanks also to Debbie, Camille, and Dilza for your thoughts. I think what we're going to do now is adjourn to have dessert and coffee outside for those who can stay. I encourage you to stay and socialize. Also, we have a set of books out there from Jessica's book that you could take on your way out. And then one final thing I wanted to mention is one of our grantees, the Big Lift, yesterday I think it was, just won, became a finalist in the Google Impact Challenge. And for which they get a grant, but they also then, as a finalist, get a shot at being a winner. And the way they become a winner is if there is community support for them. So also on the table on your way out, there's a set of instructions for how you could put in your vote for the Big Lift. So please vote for the Big Lift on winning the Google Challenge. Thank you.